Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Sibme Coach Replay Show. I'm your host, Corey Camp, and I'm excited to have back a colleague and mentor and good friend of mine, Allyson Burnett. She's also the director of our virtual learning and the head honcho of the virtual coaching services. So all of these amazing coaches follow Allyson's lead that we have here on our show. And here she is. She's here, the great and powerful and wonderful Allyson Burnett. Welcome.
Thank you, Corey. You're too kind.
Yeah, you're welcome. You're welcome. I'm super excited for because, we started this a 3-part series, and I feel like it's been a little bit longer than what I wanted for you to come back for part 2. We did part 1 a while back talking about how coaches can sharpen their saw. And you shared with us a little bit about some learning zones, which I know you'll refresh our memory on today. But we're going to continue this idea again. As coaches, sometimes finding the type of professional learning and the things that are going to help us grow as we help others grow is kind of hard. And so I'm excited for us to talk a little bit about what you've got in store for us around feedback. So I'll let you kind of take it away, Allyson.
Thanks, Corey. So this series is around sharpening our saw as coaches, and that really means how do we continue to improve in our practices so that we're the best coach we can be with the teachers we work with. And, as I was preparing for today, I was thinking one of my favorite songs is a Frank Sinatra song, The Best Is Yet to Come. And I really feel like as long as I keep learning and growing and I continue to be curious about things, I truly believe the best me is yet to come, the best me as a coach, the best me as an adjunct professor. So today really is about sharpening our saw and continuing that theme of sharpening our saw through really creating effective feedback for the teachers we're working with, which is one of our most powerful tools.
Yeah, definitely. And we talked a little bit about feedback last time and thinking about looking at our feedback and the conversations we have with those that we're coaching and making sure that we're staying in the right zone with them. You shared a really great AJ Giuliani article with us last time with the different zones in learning. But we're still looking at that feedback, but I'm really excited about today because it's really what I'm passionate about within coaching, what I really truly believe coaching should start from within this type of feedback. And it's the thing that using video has helped me really move into. I feel like I struggled with this type of feedback in the beginning when I was just kind of having to go and observe to get an idea of the current picture of reality and then help the individual I observed know what I saw, right? So you find yourself, most of our feedback, if we're just going in and observing and scripting some notes down, is here's what I saw, here's what happened when I came and observed. And we're setting the stage and helping them kind of remember. And then we start to run out of time if you're long-winded like I am. And now it becomes more directive and here's what you should do and here's what I think. And that's not truly, if it just stays there, there's definitely a place for that in coaching. But if it just stays there, we're not really helping our coaches learn and grow. So yeah. And so it all boils down to thinking about feedback that prompts reflection, right?
Yes. So, Corey, we have a takeaway for folks who are watching our show today. And if you'll pop that up on the screen, I want to start by defining with you today how, when we talk about feedback, what we're really saying here. And this is going to be a great takeaway for folks. It's a compilation of research that comes from Wiggins and Marzano and DeWitt and puts it all in one place, essentially on a one-pager, which is always my intent in life, to keep it brief and brilliant, right? So defining, well, at least it's brief.
It's my intent as well, but I never quite accomplished that. That's why I always admire. But yes, this is a great one-pager for sure.
So the definition, I want to just go to the definition of feedback, and then we're going to talk about types of feedback. But I like the definition of feedback here, and that is, hey, we're giving sort of a objective, the results of our observation observation that are showing where a teacher is in relation to their goal. And so when we're thinking about feedback, thinking about how can I share with this teacher where I think they are in relation to their goal. And if they have a goal that's very observable and measurable, that's great. So let's say, for example, it's a teacher who's working to say, oh, I'd really like to improve the way I address a student who gives an incorrect answer. And I don't want to embarrass them. So I typically take that incorrect answer in and I quickly go to the call on the next student who will probably know the answer. I'd like to get better at that. I know there's a better way of doing it. So we might look at that and say, well, gee, let's look at the teach like a champion strategy. And maybe if we use that strategy, break it down, we could be more effective. And let's start to think of how we could word that as a goal that's measurable. And it's something we could look at. And through video evidence, Corey, as you know, through the power of video, we could actually see the growth. And my feedback could be, based on this definition, to that teacher could be around where they are in relation to that goal that they have. So that's how I'd like for us to define feedback and keep that in mind as we have this conversation. And then to keep it really focused, Corey, if we'll just jump down to the bottom of that takeaway. And today's focus is on basically the three types of feedback that we typically find ourselves giving as instructional coaches. And as you said, each has its place. And however, I'm going to try to make the case for giving feedback that really can cause that reflection. And so as we look at this table, we see, hey, as an instructional coach, am I giving feedback that is essentially advice? So we have those examples there. It's almost that if I were you, here's what I would do in this situation, or here's what you need to do, or here's what I want you to try. It's very much that advice piece. And we also see feedback that's evaluative, where we're almost, on a scale of 1 to 10, here's how you're doing with this. You're sufficient with it, or this was confusing. That's judgmental, right? So if we really want to provide feedback for growth, we're going to want to do something that's more in that reflective category. And to get there, we can use some of the prompts that these gurus have suggested we might use. So if we begin our feedback with those terms like how might, or what if, or I noticed, or I wonder, that tends to lead us to feedback that is going to cause the teacher to be in a reflective state. So let me give you a concrete example. This just happened the other day. So I'm an adjunct professor at a university here in the Houston area, and my students are recording at home their mini lessons and sharing those with me in the Sibme platform in our coaching huddle, and I am providing them with feedback. So I had a student who was teaching a lesson to a pretend group of third graders, and she was talking about descriptive words, and she had this anchor chart, looked like a T-chart, and on one side she's got a word bank of descriptive words, on the other she's got some nouns that we could use with those descriptive words. And I'm looking and listening to her teach, I'm watching her teach in the video, and I'm looking at the anchor chart, and there was just this one word on the anchor chart that really caught my attention, and it was the word fat. Now, it wasn't the PHAT, cool New Orleans fat, like meaning excellent.
Right.
It was fat, F-A-T. And so my need to correct her, my need to give her advice at that point, and I actually typed it out, and I stopped and made the change. But my initial reaction was, oh, I need to come down on this with my 40 years of experience and let her know that that's not appropriate. And so there I was typing away, telling her, giving her this advice. And I stopped myself and I thought for a moment, you know what? I've got to apply what I know here. And I like to keep this handout beside my computer to remind myself of the importance of doing this. And so my feedback became reflective. And I said something like, I noticed you've used the word fat on the anchor chart in the word bank. I'm wondering if in reflection that might be a good choice, or if there's a better choice. And I published my feedback. We have that publish feedback option in Sibme, so we can always be reflective before we let the teacher we're working with see what we had to say. And she replied to me. And that's the other beauty of the feedback in Sibme. It's not one way. It's not one and done. I ask a question, and oftentimes my students or the teachers I'm working with actually respond to that, which is very cool. And her response was very appropriate. And it was, I was thinking about 30 million things as I was preparing this lesson. It just escaped my attention. I looked at, she said, I looked at that and I saw that it was totally inappropriate. It's almost like I'm endorsing or giving my students approval to use the word fat. And I would take it off the anchor chart and I'll never use it again. And so she was, through her reflection, she was able to think very deeply about that and make a decision. And I didn't have to do the thinking for her necessarily. I just needed to ask the right question.
Yeah. And I want to go quickly to a comment we have from a viewer. Karen Ramos says, this is a great one-pager. She's one of our Sibme virtual coaches. She's amazing. And yeah, I think all of us coaches here at Sibme use this. I first got this document and these prompts from you, and they made a ton of sense to me, especially when I first started coaching, because my gut instinct is, and I think what makes a lot of coaches great candidates for coaching is we tend to be pretty good problem solvers, right? Because we've done that well in our own classrooms. And so then we get promoted to do that, help other adults do that. And it looks different with adults. And so what I always find, just like you said, I find that, and I love the publish feedback button. We'll have to show it on another segment, but it's really that I'm creating my comments directly on a video, which I love. You don't have to use these prompts only if you're using video. These are also great to weave into any type of coaching conversation that you have. It might be, I noticed that you said, as you reflected on your lesson, or, how might we move differently next time through that, so you can definitely use, these are really, really good prompts to use in any conversation. Does not have to be tied to a video. But I really noticed, especially with video, I really saw in black and white that I tended to do things that were a little bit more advice giving, sometimes even evaluative, a little bit more on like the good job or this is great, and no additional context with that. And so I love that I can see that in black and white right beside the video artifact, but then with that publish feedback button, it's in draft mode and the coachee can't see it yet. And so I have to have this next to me and I go, okay, which of these do I need to completely delete because they're not related to the current goal focus in mind? Some of them, I put them in a back pocket. I put them on a notepad and say, okay, I might need to address this later on. Other times it's more of a, you know what, that doesn't need to be addressed. That's not of importance right now. And then thinking about of what needs to stay, which things do need to be more directive, and which things can I use these prompts with. And I almost always use these prompts in almost all of my comments. So definitely something that is really helpful and a great way to just amplify, I think, our feedback or think about it differently for sure.
Yeah, Corey, and you said something important there, and that is sometimes the reflective question, how might, what if, I notice, isn't always going to work. There are going to be teachers who need for us to be a little bit more directive, and that's fine too. I'm going to start being as kind of broad and reflective as I can in my questions, because I want them to do more of the work. I really feel like if I give that my feedback is advice or it's evaluative, I really think it stops there. I think, but when I ask that question, I know in my expectation is if I ask a question with the teacher I'm working with or my students, the expectation is you're going to reply to that question. So their thinking doesn't stop once they have my feedback. With my reflective feedback, their thinking really begins more deeply. Right. I give them the opportunity to think more deeply than they had. They're doing more of the work than I'm doing, and it doesn't just all stop with my advice to them. Although sometimes you have to be, as you said, directive. So Corey, let's just take a little bit deeper dive here into what's happening with the examples of feedback, and then I'll ask you to export some of those PDFs. But so if you'll go back just for 1 second, back to the one pager.
Mm-hmm.
And so looking at that very first example of how might we make the objective of the lesson clearer from the very first sentence? I could stop there. That's a question for sure. However, look at how I extend it. This is an option.
Mm-hmm.
And so I extend it by really giving the justification for the importance of an objective. So there's really two parts to this. There's my question, and then there's my justification for the importance of this, which is it's critically important to tell the students what they will learn as a result of instruction. So each of these questions really has a second part to it. If we look at the next one down, what if we were more intentionally, or if we more intentionally used examples that are aimed at student interests? And then I give an example. So it's not just the question, it's oftentimes the question with an example, or a question with a justification of the importance of doing it. Or the next one, I noticed that a lot of your questions are checking for understanding. While it's important to ask questions to determine student understanding of what the text is explicitly saying, we then need to be sure to include more rigorous questions. So I like to almost always include a little bit more, like a justification, the why, the example. And I might find that even so, I might have a teacher who does not know the answer. If to my reflective question, how might we, let's just take the example of the teacher who's calling on the student gets the answer wrong, and the teacher doesn't know what to do. I don't want to embarrass the kid. If with my reflective question, what might you do to help that student answer the question? The teacher may not know the answer to that. Like, that's a great reflective question, Allyson, but the teacher may not have the answer to that. And so that's really the beauty of coaching, isn't it? I'm there to work collaboratively with him or her, and to use my 40 plus years of experience to say, well, here are some strategies that I'm aware of that we could try. Let's build them into your lesson plan and so forth. So it really takes us into a deeper level of coaching in many cases.
Yeah, definitely. And again, we're coaching because there is some type of learning that needs to happen. Maybe they've got a good knowledge. They understand the theory behind it, but they've struggled with putting it into practice. It's a great way to kind of bridge the gap between theory and practice, to it's okay if it's affirming and confirming what they already know, and just kind of reinforcing that. And I too, I really like to kind of add that extra little bit. I think it also helps save some time in case if I just ask the question and they're just kind of like they're kind of grasping for straws, and then I got to follow it up anyway. Sometimes I'll just add just a little bit so they can kind of see where I'm coming from with that reflective prompt. And again, these four stems for leaving that feedback, I really do think open a door and invite. It's not just a rhetorical question. It really opens the door and says, tell me what I wonder, what do you think? And how might that look? And so I like these a lot. I think you can do a lot with them as well. So
Corey, let's sharpen my saw now. So here's what I would recommend to coaches do to sharpen their saw around this is to let's go back and reflect to see what kind of feedback am I giving? And I got to tell you, we fall into patterns just like everybody else. And it's very easy to get into that giving advice pattern in our feedback. So if you're listening to us today as a coach, instructional coach, and you have some feedback you can go back and look at, even if you've recorded a conversation with a teacher with whom you're working, or if you've had the luxury of using video to provide timestamp feedback, go back, like Corey and I are about to do with mine, go back and look at the kind of feedback you have been giving and see where your comfort zone lies. It's very easy for me to fall into the giving advice. I think it's faster. I feel like I've accomplished something because, they're really getting their money's worth now, buddy. They're getting the full 40 years of.
Look at all this gold I just gave you. It's amazing. I'm also, yes, it is. And it does, it feels like the faster route, but then the next, cycle, the next week or so you're working and that same issue arises because there wasn't an opportunity for transfer because we didn't let them own it. Right. And so I think, definitely. I do think I always, especially before I was using video, I was spent so much time helping them remember that I was like, I'm running out of time. Let me just give you some advice. So
cut to the chase.
Yeah, right. Now that I've helped you remember, let me tell you what to do with all this. So, so this is a great example for sure of something you could look back at, right? To see what that feedback is. It might be the scripted notes. It might be the email that you've left the coachee. It might be an audio recording where you re-listen and kind of write out some of the feedback that you what was it you said, and maybe what was the response. But if you're using Sibme, it's there, right?
Yeah,
it's already there for you. So.
Yeah. So I have to challenge our Sibme coaches. You can go back. I do want you to go back. I want you to look at your feedback through this lens. Am I giving advice? Am I being judgmental and evaluative, or am I being reflective? So Corey, let's export my comments here. I shared this video and my comments in a huddle with you. Let's export those comments. And what I want to do is I want to look at those comments in isolation without the video. And I want to look at them through the lens of a feedback that's going to be reflective. And so I'm going to have to pull up my printed copy because it's hard for me to see those comments there. But let's just, there you go.
There we go.
So let's just look at some of these. Not saying it's going to be perfection, but let's take a look at what I had to say. And that looks like these comments are from 2017. So I've gotten better since then. Corey, don't get.
You only go up, right?
So the first bit of feedback I gave it 24 seconds was a how could you? So there I was applying what I know to be the way I want to coach. How could you get your students more involved in the early part of the lesson? And then I added my probably a little bit of advice in disguise. Maybe they could have been asked to give examples of numbers in everyday life. So looking at that now, I'd say probably a little bit. I probably would be a little bit broader and more general right now. I probably gave her the answer that was a little advicey. So, 3 years down the road or 4 years down, I guess it's 3 years, I would change that. Let's go to the next comment at 26 seconds. I noticed, so I've got my little prompt there, that you seem to lack a bit of confidence as the lesson begins. And what do you think you could have made you more comfortable? So I'm good with that comment. I think that comment is very much reflective. So Corey, the next one at 54 seconds. So this is what you were talking about. This is not a corrective. This is not feedback for correction in that sense. This is what a lot of folks would call the glow comment, right? Mm-hmm. And then we go to 147, where it's how might you make the wording of the objective more student friendly. And then I have my little research piece, my justification. While the objective tells the student the learning goal for the day, some districts will ask the objective be stated student friendly terms, for example. So I'm okay with that one. I think I gave them a little justification for why we would do that. So this is the process that I would encourage coaches to go through, Corey, as they sharpen their saw around giving reflective feedback. And, we all have our coaching style. And for some folks who are listening, you might be thinking, well, that might be good for you, Allyson, and have fun with that. But I am going to give them advice because that's what they're paying me for. And we'll see who ends up, we'll see where we end up.
Right.
Okay. So Corey, that's all the wisdom I can share today.
Well, I love it. And, so a few coaching colleagues of mine, when I first started using Sibme, we did this. We put together, and it's actually a Sibme mission now. It's called Coaches of the Round Table, where we didn't take the videos that we were using, but we exported the comments from the videos and brought them to our next meeting, our little small group where we work together. And we just kind of we just pass them down the line and just color coded. This is evaluative. This is, you're just giving advice here, and more awesome. This one follows the reflective piece. And then we kind of handed each other's back and just kind of looked overall. And sometimes we would pull a couple from multiple videos, we go into a few different huddles and, just do a random sampling just to kind of check it out and see what we could learn. And what I loved about that process is, I was able to see other people, just I love looking at the feedback that you're giving. And I'm like, oh, I like how she worded that. And I really like how that goes. And I don't need to see the video to be able to look at the quality of coaching that and support that might be happening. So So there's lots of different ways, again, folks,
Sure.
that this can look, and we encourage you to try that out. Let us know if you use these and how they go, how it went. But this one-pager document that we're sharing at the beginning of the show, Keys for Effective Feedback, is the takeaway for this week's episode. So if you go to the Learning Center, learn.sibme.com, we'll put the link below. You can access all takeaways from this is the 33rd episode. Can you believe that? 33 weeks we've been coming live. So you can access all of them, including this week's. So check it out. Let us know how you like it. If you have any other ideas for prompting reflection, we'd love to hear them. And Allyson, I'm super excited that you got to join us today.
It was great. And Corey, I got to tell you, I said I was done, but I have one more thought. And that is, when you were talking about how you were using this exercise in with your colleagues, I was thinking about, this is really a calibration exercise as well.
Mm-hmm.
So as a group sitting down, looking at the same video together, having these prompts in front of you and deciding as a group, where do I need to make a comment in relation to a specific goal, and how would we make that comment, and crafting it together in a sense we're formulating it together to try to give the very best feedback. And I'm going to learn from you in a synchronous way, in a live way, as we work through that together. So maybe that's something we'll do in the future.
Yeah, that's super exciting. Yeah. Great ideas. Great ideas always come from the Coach Replay Show. And it's definitely a place where I always get to learn, and we get to learn together. So Allyson, again, thank you so much for joining us today, folks. Let us know what else you need. I'm excited for next week's episode with Kathy Perrett. She's going to talk with us a little bit about a super cool project that hopefully some of y'all viewers are a part of or will become a part of. It's kind of a worldwide thing that's happening. So stay tuned next week for our episode with Kathy Perrett and the remote learning playbook that we've got. But Allyson, I will see you, I think, in a few. We've got another meeting later today. So See you on the flip side.
Okay.
Bye, everyone.